with a mountain of unpaid bills scattered across her kitchen table, and less than $2,800 in her savings account. Sophia Blackwood stood at the edge of financial ruin, staring at the weathered key to her father's abandoned property that she had avoided visiting for 7 painful years. Desperate and running out of options, she made what everyone in her small Colorado town considered the most foolish decision possible, investing her last dollars to renovate the dilapidated barn her estranged father had left her in his will, a structure that had not been touched since the 1940s. What she discovered hidden behind a false wall in her father's workshop would not only pull her family back from the brink of poverty, but would ignite a frenzied gold rush across 3 states, bringing government geologists, mining companies, and treasure hunters to her doorstep within days of her earth-shattering find. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The late afternoon sun filtered through the dusty blinds of Sophia's rented duplex, casting long shadows across the pile of final notice bills that had become her constant companions. The bright red past due stamps seemed to mock her from every envelope. She pushed a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and glanced at the digital clock on her microwave. 5:47 p.m. Her 10-year-old daughter Lily would be finishing her after-school program soon, and Sophia was determined not to let her see the worry that had become etched into her face over these past difficult months. At 34, Sophia never imagined her life would unravel so completely. With a degree in environmental science and a growing career in sustainable agriculture consulting, she had been building a stable future for herself and Lily after her husband, Greg, had abandoned them 3 years ago, leaving nothing but crushing debt and broken promises in his wake. The divorce had been messy, with Greg hiding assets and eventually moving to Alaska, with his new girlfriend effectively removing himself from child support obligations. Then, Lily had been diagnosed with severe asthma and environmental allergies that required specialized treatments and medication. Their insurance covered only a fraction of the costs, labeling many of the treatments as experimental or optional. The mounting medical bills had forced Sophia to take on more clients than she could reasonably handle, working 14-hour days while still struggling to provide the care Lily needed. But it was the unexpected layoff that truly devastated their finances. The small environmental consulting firm where Sophia worked had lost its major government contract, resulting in company-wide layoffs. Despite her excellent performance reviews, Sophia had been among the last hired and first let go. The severance package had barely covered 2 months of expenses, and the job market in rural Colorado was brutally competitive, especially for specialized positions in sustainable agriculture. Unable to maintain her previous income and facing Lily's ongoing medical expenses, Sophia had fallen behind on rent, utilities, and even Lily's medication. Their landlord, a corporate management company based in Denver, had shown no mercy despite her pleas for understanding. "Mom," Lily's voice called from the hallway, her footsteps light as she entered their small living room. Despite the weight of asthma medications and frequent hospital visits, Lily moved through the world with an irrepressible optimism that never failed to amaze Sophia. Sophia quickly slid the overdue notices under a cookbook and arranged her face into what she hoped was a convincing smile. "Hey, sweet pea, how was school today?" Lily appeared in the doorway, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, freckles scattered across her nose, and bright green eyes, so like her father's, that seemed to absorb everything around her. Despite her health challenges, she possessed a quiet resilience and creativity that often left Sophia in awe. "Ms. Patterson let me work on my science project during free time," Lily said, dropping her backpack by the couch. "I am researching how gold mining affected Colorado's ecosystem. Did you know that some rivers are still contaminated from mining? That happened over 100 years ago." The mention of gold mining sent a strange shiver down Sophia's spine, reminding her of her father's obsession, one of many topics they had argued about before his death. Jackson Blackwood had spent decades chasing rumors of lost mines and hidden veins of gold, throughout the Rockies, sacrificing his marriage, career, and eventually his relationship with his only daughter in pursuit of what Sophia had always considered a fool's errand. "That is really interesting, Lil," Sophia replied, pushing away the memory. "Maybe we can visit the Historical Society sometime to research it more." As she prepared dinner from their dwindling supplies, pasta with the last jar of sauce, and a small salad from the community garden where she volunteered, Sophia's mind raced through increasingly desperate options. Her sister Claire lived in San Francisco with her husband and worked for a tech company, but they were still paying off student loans and had just had twins. They had already sent what they could spare. Her mother had passed away when Sophia was in college, and her relationship with her father had been strained until his death 7 years ago, leaving her without family support to fall back on. She had already applied for every assistance program available, but the waiting lists were months long, and many required documentation she was struggling to gather. Dr. Martinez, Lily's pulmonologist, had called the previous week with news that made Sophia's situation even more urgent. "Lily's responding well to the new treatment protocol," he had said, his voice kind but concerned. "But consistency is crucial at this stage. Interrupting the medication regimen now could trigger a severe regression and potentially lead to hospitalization." The treatment cost $375 per month after insurance, and Lily needed at least another year to stabilize her condition and develop the lung strength that would prepare her for the physical challenges of adolescence. Without it, she would likely face chronic respiratory issues that could limit her educational opportunities and quality of life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After Lily finished her homework and settled on the couch with a library book about pioneer women in the West, Sophia opened her laptop at their small kitchen table. She had $2,783 left in her savings account after paying for Lily's latest prescription. Their rent was $1,450 monthly, due in 10 days, and she owed another $640 for utilities that had already received disconnection warnings. She scrolled through job listings that all seemed to require qualifications she did not quite have, offered part-time hours that would not cover childcare costs, or were located in Denver, a commute that would be impossible given Lily's school schedule and medical appointments. She was about to close the browser when she noticed an email she had been avoiding for weeks. The subject line read, "Ray, Jackson Blackwood Estate, Final Notice." Sophia's finger hovered over the delete button, as it had every time her father's lawyer had attempted to contact her since his death. But something, desperation perhaps, or simple curiosity, made her click it open instead. "Ms. Blackwood," the email began, "this is our final attempt to contact you regarding your father's property in Pine Creek. As executor of his estate, I am obligated to inform you that property taxes are now 7 years in arrears. If no action is taken within 30 days, the county will seize the property for auction. While the land has minimal assessed value due to its remote location and the dilapidated condition of the structures, it is legally yours to claim or abandon. Please contact our office immediately to discuss your options." Attached was a recent photograph of her father's property, 5 acres of rocky, pine-covered land with a small cabin and large barn that had once been his workshop. The cabin was clearly deteriorating, with broken windows and a partially collapsed porch, but the barn, built of hand-hewn timber in the 1940s by her grandfather, still stood proud against the backdrop of distant mountains. Sophia had spent summers there as a child before her father's gold obsession had consumed him entirely. She remembered the barn's high ceilings, the smell of sawdust and metal, and the way her father's eyes would light up when he showed her how to use tools or identify different rocks he had collected from his expeditions. After their final argument, when she had told him he was wasting his life chasing myths while neglecting real relationships, she had vowed never to return to the property. Even after his death from a heart attack while on a solo prospecting trip, she had refused to visit, asking the lawyer to handle everything. She had assumed the property would be sold, the proceeds, if any, placed in an account she would never touch. But now, staring at the photograph and her dwindling bank account, Sophia felt something shift inside her. The property was remote, nearly 40 minutes from the nearest town, but it was shelter. The land might be rugged, but it was debt-free, aside from the back taxes. And while the cabin looked uninhabitable, the barn had potential. Her father had converted half of it into a workshop and the other half into a sort of apartment, where he stayed during the winter months when the cabin was too difficult to heat. A crazy idea began forming in Sophia's mind. With their savings, she could potentially pay the back taxes, which the lawyer estimated at around $1,000 to $100 for such a low-value rural property. That would leave enough to begin basic renovations on the barn apartment, ensuring it had running water, heat, and electricity. They could live there while she looked for work in nearby Pine Creek or Riverview, both small towns, but with lower living costs than their current location. For the rest of the evening, as she helped Lily with her science homework and prepared her medications, Sophia found herself returning to the idea of her father's property. She researched Pine Creek online, discovering it was a small former mining town that had recently begun attracting artists, remote workers, and people seeking affordable mountain living. The town had a decent elementary school, a medical clinic that could handle Lily's routine care, and was only an hour from a hospital that could manage her more specialized treatments. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Sophia sat at her kitchen table, staring at the final notice from her landlord and the email from her father's lawyer. It felt like the universe was offering her a choice: continue struggling in a situation that was steadily worsening, or take a massive gamble on a property tied to painful memories that could either save them or consume their last resources. She thought about Lily's resilience despite her health challenges. She thought about their cramped duplex with its rising rent and indifferent corporate landlord. She thought about her father, a man who had chosen dreams over practical reality, but who had also taught her self-reliance and resourcefulness. By midnight, her decision was made. She would contact the lawyer in the morning. It might be reckless, but staying in their current situation guaranteed failure. At least her father's property offered something their current life did not: ownership, possibilities, and a connection to family history that Lily had never had the chance to experience. The next morning, Sophia called the lawyer's office as soon as they opened, surprising the receptionist, who had apparently given up on ever hearing from Jackson Blackwood's. "Daught, Ms. Blackwood. This is unexpected. Mr. Peterson has been trying to reach you for years regarding your father's estate. I know, and I apologize for that," Sophia replied, swallowing her pride. "Is it possible to meet with him today? I am interested in claiming the property before the tax auction." 2 hours later, Sophia sat across from Harold Peterson, a man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office in downtown Riverview was modest, but well-maintained, with bookshelves filled with legal volumes and framed photographs of Colorado landscapes. "I am pleased you have decided to claim your inheritance, Ms. Blackwood," Peterson said, placing a folder on his desk. "Your father was adamant that the property should go to you, despite your differences." Sophia felt a twinge of guilt. "I did not handle things well with him, but right now, I need to know exactly what is involved in keeping the property." Peterson nodded, opening the folder. "The total amount for back taxes is $1,183.47, once paid. The property is yours free and clear. Your father owned it outright, one of the few financial decisions he made that I fully endorsed." "And the condition of the buildings?" Sophia asked, thinking of Lily's asthma and their immediate need for safe shelter. Peterson's expression grew more serious. "The cabin is not habitable in its current state. Roof damage, broken windows, possible structural issues. The barn is in better condition. Your father maintained it meticulously and lived in the apartment section during his later years. It has basic plumbing and electricity, though both will need updating to meet current codes." "What about the workshop section?" "Mostly intact. Your father kept it organized. All his equipment and personal effects are still there. As you requested nothing be removed after his death." Sophia nodded, pushing away another wave of guilt. "And the cost to make the barn apartment livable?" That depends on your standards and how much work you can do yourself. Basic safety updates might run $3,000 to $5,000. More extensive renovations could be $10,000 to $15,000. But there are programs through the Rural Development Commission that might provide assistance, especially for a single mother with a child who has medical needs. As Peterson outlined the legal process for reclaiming the property, Sophia's mind was already racing ahead to logistics. They would need to give notice at their current rental, arrange for utilities at the property, begin planning essential renovations, and transfer Lily to the Pine Creek Elementary School. "There's one more thing," Peterson said, reaching into a drawer. "Your father left this for you, with instructions that I should give it to you personally if you ever decided to claim the property." He handed her a small wooden box, roughly 6 inches square, made of polished pine with intricate carvings around the edges. A small brass latch kept it closed. He was quite insistent that only you should open it, Peterson added. Sophia stared at the box, memories flooding back. Her father had made similar boxes for her as birthday gifts when she was a child, each one containing a special stone or crystal he had found on his expeditions. This one felt heavier than those had been. "Thank you," she said, placing it in her bag without opening it. Whatever message or token her father had left, she was not ready to face it in front of a stranger. By early afternoon, Sophia had signed the necessary paperwork, paid the back taxes from her dwindling savings, and officially become the owner of her father's property. She now had $1,599.53 remaining, enough to begin basic renovations and cover immediate needs, but little margin for error. That evening, she sat Lily down to explain the changes coming to their lives. She had prepared herself for resistance, tears, or fear of the unknown. Instead, Lily's eyes had widened with excitement. "We are going to live in Great-Grandpa's barn? The one with the workshop where he looked for gold?" Sophia blinked in surprise. "How do you know about that?" "Dad told me stories before he left," Lily explained. "He said Great-Grandpa was a treasure hunter who believed in a lost gold mine that everyone else thought was just a legend." Sophia felt a flash of irritation that Greg had romanticized her father's obsession while she had worked so hard to create a stable, practical life for their daughter. But Lily's enthusiasm was impossible to dampen. "Can I help fix up the barn? Can I have my own space in the workshop? Can we look for the gold mine too?" Sophia smiled despite her concerns. "We can definitely fix up the barn together, and you can have a space for your science projects." "But honey, the gold mine was just a story. Great-Grandpa spent his whole life looking for something that probably does not exist." Lily's face fell slightly, but her resilience quickly reasserted itself. "Maybe we will find his research and maps. Maybe he discovered something he never told anyone about." Rather than arguing, Sophia redirected the conversation to practical matters: packing, school transfer, and what furniture they would bring to their new home. But as Lily chattered excitedly about their adventure, Sophia found her thoughts drifting to the wooden box in her bag, still unopened. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Sophia finally took out the box and sat with it at their kitchen table. Her hands trembled slightly as she unlatched it, unsure what final message her father might have left. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded red velvet, lay a tarnished brass key with an unusual tooth pattern, a small leather-bound journal with her father's distinctive handwriting visible on the yellowed pages, and a folded piece of paper addressed simply, "For Sophia, when you are ready to understand." She unfolded the note with cautious fingers. "Sophia," it began in her father's bold handwriting, "if you are reading this, I am gone, and you have finally come back to the place that was always meant to be yours. I know you thought my search was foolish, but some pursuits are about more than practical outcomes. Sometimes the journey itself reveals treasures we never expected to find. The key opens something in the workshop that I have never shown anyone. The journal explains why. Whether you choose to continue what I started or chart your own path, know that everything I did was ultimately for you, even when I failed to show it properly. You always said I was chasing myths instead of building something real. Perhaps you were right, but I hope someday you will understand that some myths contain more truth than the world is ready to accept." with love and faith in your strength. Dad. Sophia stared at the note, emotions warring inside her, anger at his stubbornness, grief for their lost relationship, curiosity about what the key might open, and most surprisingly, a flicker of excitement that felt uncomfortably similar to what she had always criticized in him. The allure of the unknown, the possibility of discovery. She closed the box without examining the journal, not yet ready to immerse herself in her father's thoughts. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of their move, and she needed practical focus, not distractions about lost mines and hidden treasures. The next week passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sophia gave notice at their duplex, arranged for utilities, to be connected at the property, and began the process of transferring Lily to Pine Creek Elementary. She visited the Rural Development Office and discovered she qualified for a modest home improvement grant designed for low-income families in remote areas, which would provide $3,500 toward essential safety updates. Throughout the preparations, Lily's excitement never wavered. She researched the history of Pine Creek, created elaborate drawings of how she wanted to set up her bedroom in the barn apartment, and even started a journal about their great adventure, something her therapist had suggested might help her process the significant change. 9 days after her meeting with Peterson, Sophia and Lily drove up the winding dirt road to Jackson Blackwood's property, their small SUV packed with essential belongings, while the rest waited in a storage unit in town until the barn apartment was ready. As they crested the final hill, the property came into view. 5 acres of pine-studded land nestled in a small valley, with the Rocky Mountains rising dramatically in the distance. The cabin looked even more dilapidated in person, its windows broken and roof partially caved in on one side. But the barn stood solid against the landscape, its weathered red paint faded, but intact, large double doors facing them like an entrance to a new chapter. Sophia parked in the overgrown gravel area between the buildings and turned to Lily, who was practically vibrating with excitement in the passenger seat. "Well, what do you think of your new home?" Lily unbuckled her seatbelt and pressed her face against the window. "It is like something from one of my books. Can we go inside the barn right now? Can we see the workshop? Let us take it slow, Sweet Pea. The apartment needs checking before we can stay there. We might need to camp in the main room for a few nights until we get everything ready." They stepped out into the crisp mountain air, nearly 8,000 feet above sea level, the scent of pine and wildflowers surrounding them. Sophia watched Lily carefully for any signs of respiratory distress at the altitude, but her daughter seemed energized rather than constrained by the mountain environment. The barn's main doors were secured with a heavy padlock that opened with the key Peterson had given her along with the property deed. The hinges creaked as Sophia pulled the doors wide, revealing a cavernous space divided roughly in half, one side clearly a workshop with benches, tools and equipment covered in dust but neatly organized, the other converted into a rustic living space with definite potential. Lily darted inside, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. "Mom, there's a whole apartment in here, and look at all the cool stuff in the workshop." Sophia followed more cautiously, surveying what would become their home. The apartment section had a small kitchen area with an old but solid wood burning stove, a living space with basic furniture, a bathroom that would need significant updating, and a sleeping loft accessed by a sturdy ladder. The entire space was dusty and smelled faintly of wood smoke and motor oil, but the structure itself appeared sound. The workshop side was what truly captured her attention. Her father had created an elaborate space filled with workbenches, specialized tools, cabinets full of rock samples, and walls covered with maps of the surrounding mountains. A large drafting table dominated one corner, still covered with papers weighted down with polished stones. In another area stood what appeared to be assaying equipment for testing mineral content. "Your great-grandpa was very organized," Sophia observed, running her hand along a workbench where tools had been arranged by size and type, each with its outline painted on the wood so it could be returned to its proper place. "He was looking for the vanishing mine," Lily said with confidence, examining a large map pinned to one wall. "Dad said it was supposed to have the purest gold anyone had ever seen, but it disappeared after a landslide or something." Sophia approached. The map, surprised by the detail, it showed the surrounding mountains with markings, notations, and symbols in her father's handwriting. X's and circles indicated what appeared to be exploration sites, with dates spanning decades. The Reynolds lost claim, she read from a heading at the top of the map. Discovered 1873, lost 1877. Sought ever since, for the first time. Sophia felt a flicker of understanding about her father's obsession. The map was not the work of a delusional treasure hunter, but a methodical researcher who had approached his quest with scientific rigor. As they explored further, Sophia's practical side reasserted itself. The apartment would need work before it was truly livable, updating the plumbing, ensuring the electrical system was safe, sealing drafts around windows, and thoroughly cleaning every surface. The bathroom contained an old clawfoot tub and sink. That could be salvaged, but the plumbing was outdated and the water heater ancient. We will need to camp in the main room for a few days while we get the apartment ready, Sophia explained to Lily. Think of it like an indoor camping trip. Can we use great-grandpa's stuff? Lily asked, pointing to camping equipment neatly stored on shelves along one wall. Some of it, yes, but we brought our own sleeping bags and essentials. That first night in their new home was both challenging and oddly peaceful. They set up sleeping bags in the main workshop area, using battery-powered lanterns for light since Sophia wanted an electrician to check the wiring before they used the barn's power. Despite the discomfort of sleeping on the floor, the mountain silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or whisper of wind through pine needles, was a welcome change from the constant noise of their previous neighborhood. As Lily fell asleep, Sophia found herself drawn to her father's drafting table. Using her lantern, she examined the papers still spread across its surface, geological surveys, handwritten notes about mineral deposits, and sketches of landscape features that might indicate the presence of gold. One paper contained a list of names, prospectors from the 1870s who had reportedly discovered and then lost the Reynolds claim. What were you really looking for, Dad? She whispered to the empty workshop. Was it just gold or something else? She remembered suddenly the box Peterson had given her. She had packed it in her personal bag, but had not opened it again since that first night. Now, surrounded by her father's life's work, she felt compelled to examine its contents more thoroughly. The journal inside the box proved to be not a personal diary, but a research log, meticulously detailing her father's investigation into the lost mine over decades. He had interviewed elderly residents of Pine Creek who remembered stories from their grandparents, tracked down descendants of the original miners, and cross-referenced historical accounts with geological surveys, according to the legend as Jackson had recorded it. Thomas Reynolds and his partners had discovered an unusually rich gold vein in 1873, extracting nearly $50,000 worth of gold, an enormous sum at the time, before a catastrophic landslide buried the entrance. Reynolds had left detailed maps of the location, but when he returned with investors to reopen the mine, the entire landscape had changed so dramatically that the entrance could not be found. Reynolds died in poverty, considered either a fraud or delusional by most, but a small contingent believed his story and had sought the lost mine ever since. What struck Sophia most was her father's methodical approach. This was not blind faith or foolish hope. He had applied scientific principles, geological knowledge, and historical research to narrow down the possible locations. The journal's later entries suggested he had been closing in on something significant. In the months before his death, the final entry, dated just 2 weeks before his fatal heart attack, read, cross-referenced the shadow measurements from Reynolds' original survey, with modern topographical maps, accounting for the landslide's effect on the western ridge. I have identified 3 potential locations for the original entrance. Site B seems most promising, based on mineral samples. We'll begin exploratory excavation tomorrow. There was no record of what he had found, if anything, but a small note in the margin added, "Need to prepare the hidden compartment. If this is what I think it is, the publicity could be dangerous until I have secured proper rights." Sophia closed the journal, her mind racing. Hidden compartment. What had her father discovered that required such secrecy? And what was the brass key for? It did not match any of the visible locks or cabinets in the workshop. Too exhausted to investigate further, she returned to her sleeping bag beside Lily. But her dreams were filled with images of hidden doors, secret maps, and her father's voice calling her to finish what he had started. The next morning brought their first full day at the property, and a clearer assessment of the work ahead. In daylight, the barn apartment showed both its promise and its challenges. The bones were good, solid timber framing, a tight roof, and thoughtful design that maximized the available space. But decades of minimal updates had left the systems outdated and potentially unsafe. Sophia's first priority was water and electricity. She called the local utilities to schedule inspections and contacted a plumber recommended by Peterson, who specialized in updating historic buildings. Next came the hardware store in Pine Creek, a family-owned business that had served the area for generations. Pine Creek itself was smaller than Sophia had expected. Essentially a main street with a handful of businesses, a small elementary school, and scattered houses. But it had a charm that came from authenticity rather than tourist-oriented quaintness. The hardware store, Mackenzie's, occupied a brick building that had clearly stood since the town's mining heyday. Inside, Sophia found not just supplies, but a potential ally. Robert Mackenzie, a man in his 50s with calloused hands and a practical demeanor, listened to her situation with genuine interest. Jackson Blackwood's daughter, your father was a regular here. Brilliant man, even if his interests ran toward the speculative. That is a diplomatic way to put it, Sophia replied with a small smile. He knew what he was doing with tools and materials, though. That barn apartment is solid work. Needs updating, sure, but the foundation is good. Mackenzie leaned against the counter. You planning to stay long term? That is the hope. I need somewhere stable for my daughter. And the property is paid for. Just need to make it properly livable. Mackenzie nodded thoughtfully. I might be able to help with that. My son-in-law Dan is a contractor who specializes in rural renovations. And between you and me, business is slow right now. He might cut you a deal if you are willing to do some of the work yourself. This conversation led to an arrangement that would shape the coming weeks. Dan Phillips, Mackenzie's son-in-law, agreed to guide Sophia through the renovation process, focusing on essential updates while teaching her to handle simpler tasks herself. It was a partnership born of small-town practicality. Dan needed work during the off-season, and Sophia needed expertise she could not afford at full rates. The first week at the property established their rhythm during the day while Lily attended her new school, where she had been warmly welcomed by the teacher and 7 other students in her grade. Sophia worked alongside Dan to make the apartment habitable. Evenings were spent organizing their belongings, exploring the property, and learning about their new community. Pine Creek Elementary proved to be exactly what Lily needed: small classes, individualized attention, and a staff experienced in handling medical needs despite the rural setting. Principal Hammond, a woman who had taught in the same school for 30 years before taking the administrative role, personally ensured that Lily's asthma medication schedule was understood by all staff and that emergency protocols were in place. We may be small, but we take care of our own, Hammond assured Sophia. Half our students have some sort of medical consideration. Comes with living at altitude in a former mining region. Lily will fit right in. By the end of the first week, they had running water, certified safe electricity, and a functioning bathroom, with a water heater that no longer made alarming noises. The kitchen area had been updated with a refrigerator salvaged from the hardware store's back room. Previous owner ordered the wrong size, never picked it up, and the wood stove professionally cleaned and certified safe. They moved from sleeping bags on the workshop floor to proper beds in the apartment section, giving Lily the sleeping loft she had coveted and setting up Sophia's bed in what had been designed as a small office space. Throughout this process, Sophia found herself increasingly drawn to her father's workshop and the mystery it contained. During breaks in the renovation work, she would examine his maps, read his research notes, and try to understand the system behind his carefully organized rock samples and equipment. The brass key remained a puzzle. She had discreetly searched for a matching lock, but found nothing obvious. It was Lily who made the breakthrough, though not in the way either of them expected. On Sunday afternoon, 10 days after their arrival, Sophia was organizing kitchen supplies while Lily explored the workshop with permission to look, but not touch anything that might be sharp or heavy. "Mom," Lily's excited voice called suddenly. "I found something weird." Sophia hurried into the workshop to find Lily kneeling beside one of the workbenches, pointing at the wooden floor underneath. "There is a different sound when I walk here," Lily demonstrated, stepping in different spots. "It sounds hollow in this spot, but solid over here." Sophia knelt beside her daughter, tapping the floorboards. Sure enough, there was a distinct difference in sound between certain sections. Looking more carefully, she noticed nearly invisible seams in the wood, a square roughly 3 feet on each side. The boards aligned so precisely that the pattern was not obvious, unless you were specifically looking for it. "It is a trapdoor," Sophia realized aloud, "or some kind of hidden compartment." She ran her fingers along the edges, but found no obvious way to open it. Then she remembered her father's note. "The key opens something in the workshop that I have never shown anyone. Lily, can you get the wooden box from my bedside table? Carefully, please." While Lily retrieved the box, Sophia examined the floor section more carefully. Near one corner, she found a small, almost imperceptible brass fitting that looked like it might be a keyhole covered by a sliding panel. When Lily returned with the box, Sophia removed the tarnished key and tried it in the fitting. It slid in perfectly, and with a firm turn, there was an audible click. The floor section shifted slightly, revealing a recessed handle. "What is it, Mom?" Lily asked, eyes wide with excitement. "I am not sure," Sophia replied honestly, "but I think we are about to find out what Great-Grandpa wanted to keep safe." Together, they lifted the trapdoor, revealing a space about 3 feet deep and 3 feet square, lined with metal to protect from moisture. Inside, nestled in protective cloth, lay several items that immediately took Sophia's breath away. A leather portfolio bound with straps, several small canvas bags that clinked with the unmistakable sound of metal, a wooden box similar to the one Peterson had given her but larger, and what appeared to be an antique surveying tool wrapped carefully in oilcloth. "Treasure," Lily whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Let us see what we have before we call it treasure," Sophia said, though her heart was racing with possibilities. Carefully, they lifted the items out and placed them on the nearest workbench. Sophia opened the leather portfolio first, revealing a collection of yellowed maps, some appearing to date from the 1870s, based on their style and paper. One in particular caught her attention, a detailed survey map labeled Reynolds Claim. Original survey with notations in faded ink showing elevation markers, compass readings, and what appeared to be the entrance to a mine shaft marked with a distinctive symbol. Next came the canvas bags. Opening the first one revealed what Sophia had both hoped for and feared. Gold nuggets of varying sizes, some as small as peas, others as large as walnuts, all with the distinctive yellow gleam of high-purity gold. There were perhaps 2 dozen nuggets in total across the 3 bags, along with several chunks of quartz with gold veins clearly visible running through them. The wooden box contained a leather-bound journal much older than her father's, the pages brittle with age. Inside, written in a careful hand, was a daily log beginning in March 1873 and ending abruptly in September 1877. The first entry read, "Claim established following second assay, Reynolds Harker, and myself equal partners. Initial samples show remarkable purity, possibly as high as 23 carats. Reynolds insists on secrecy until we determine full extent of the vein." The surveying tool, when unwrapped, proved to be a transit compass from the 1870s, beautifully preserved and still in working condition. "This belonged to the original miners," Sophia said softly, piecing together what they had found. "These are the actual maps and journal from the lost Reynolds Claim. Dad found them. Or maybe they were passed down through our family." Sophia stared at the collection of artifacts spread across her father's workbench, her mind struggling to process the implications. If these were authentic, and the aged condition of the paper, The distinctive patina of the surveying tools and the unmistakable heft of the gold nuggets all suggested they were. Then her father had not been chasing fantasies. He had found tangible evidence of the Reynolds lost claim, a discovery that could potentially change everything for her and Lily. "Mom, are we rich now?" Lily asked, carefully touching one of the gold nuggets with a fingertip. "I do not know, sweet pea," Sophia replied. "Honestly, these items are definitely valuable, but there is a lot we need to understand before we can know what it all means." As a trained environmental scientist, Sophia understood enough about geology to recognize that the samples were significant. The nuggets were larger and purer than typical placer gold found in streams, suggesting they came from a primary deposit, a vein rather than scattered alluvial gold. The quartz specimens, with visible gold threading through them, indicated a potentially substantial deposit. But even more valuable than the gold itself might be the historical documentation, original survey maps, and journals from one of the region's most legendary lost mines. To historians, museums, and collectors, these items could be worth far more than their weight in gold. After carefully photographing everything in position, Sophia began methodically documenting their find. She created a detailed inventory, noting dimensions, approximate weights, and distinct characteristics of each item, the gold samples alone. By her rough estimation, based on current prices, and the approximate weight, might be worth $30,000 to $40,000, a life-changing amount given their precarious financial situation, but not the fortune that finding an actual productive gold vein would represent. The historical materials, however, were more difficult to value. The original miner's journal, which appeared to be written by someone named James Harker, detailed daily operations of the mine, including specific production figures, locations of the richest ore bodies, and precisely measured compass directions. From fixed landmarks to the mine entrance, if accurate, these coordinates might indeed lead to the rediscovery of the lost mine. As evening approached and Lily's excitement began to give way to fatigue, Sophia carefully returned everything to the hidden compartment except for Harker's journal, which she wanted to read more thoroughly. She locked the trapdoor, pocketed the key, and focused on getting Lily fed, medicated, and settled for the night. "But I am not tired," Lily protested as Sophia tucked her into bed in the sleeping loft. "We found actual treasure. Can we not stay up and read more of the journal?" "Tomorrow," Sophia promised. "We need to think carefully about what we have found and what to do next. This is not just about us, Lily. If these documents are authentic, they are historically significant, like museum stuff, possibly. And if they really do lead to a lost gold mine, there are legal considerations about mineral rights and land ownership. We need to be smart about this." Once Lily had finally fallen asleep, Sophia sat at the small kitchen table with Harker's journal, a notebook of her own, and a strong cup of tea. As she carefully turned the brittle pages, a detailed picture began to emerge of what had actually happened to the legendary lost mine. According to Harker, the three partners, Reynolds, Harker, and a man named Blackwood, possibly her great-grandfather, had discovered an unusually rich gold vein in a remote section of the mountains. Rather than filing an official claim immediately, which would have alerted others to their find, they had worked the mine secretly for years, periodically transporting small amounts of gold to different assay offices across the region. To avoid raising suspicion about the source, the operation had been remarkably productive, with Harker meticulously recording each partner's share. By Sophia's calculation, they had extracted gold worth approximately $50,000 in 1870s currency, equivalent to well over $1 million today. But tensions had grown between the partners over how to proceed, with Reynolds pushing to bring in investors to expand operations, while Harker and Blackwood preferred to continue their small, secretive approach. The final entries detailed the catastrophic landslide that had buried the mine entrance. Following unusually heavy spring rains in 1877, Reynolds had been inside the mine when it collapsed, but had escaped through a ventilation shaft. The partners had spent months trying to reopen the main entrance, but the scale of the landslide made it impossible with their limited resources. The last entry, Dated September 18, 1877. Read, Reynolds departed for Denver to secure investment for heavy machinery. Blackwood, and I fear his desperation will lead him to reveal too much. We have agreed to conceal our most promising samples and the precise coordinates until his return. The landscape has been so altered that casual searchers will never locate the main shaft without our detailed measurements from the new ridge formation. I have entrusted copies of the critical survey data to Blackwood for safekeeping, as he is the most meticulous among us. There the journal ended abruptly. Historical records, as documented in her father's research notes, indicated that Reynolds had never secured his financing. He had died in Denver in 1878, widely considered a deluded failure or a fraud. But what had happened to Harker and the original Blackwood? Had they ever attempted to reopen the mine? Why had the precise location remained lost if they had the coordinates? Sophia turned to her father's journal for possible answers, focusing on the sections where he discussed his family connection to the mine. According to his research, James Blackwood, her great-great-grandfather, had eventually homesteaded the property where they now lived, approximately 5 miles from the mine site. He had lived a modest life as a carpenter and farmer, giving no indication that he possessed information about a lost gold mine. Upon his death in 1921, his son, her great-grandfather, had inherited the property and workshop. Her father speculated that either James Blackwood had been unable to relocate the mine, despite having the coordinates, perhaps due to massive changes in the landscape, or, more intriguingly, had deliberately chosen not to pursue it further after some unknown event. He had, however, apparently preserved the documentation and samples, passing them down through the family as a carefully guarded secret. Her grandfather had known about the family connection to the Reynolds claim, but had considered it little more than an interesting piece of family lore. It was her father who had become obsessed with finding the truth, dedicating decades to researching historical records, geological surveys, and old mining claims. His final journal entries suggested he had been on the verge of a breakthrough, having used modern topographical mapping and GPS technology to translate the old survey coordinates to current landscape features. The hidden compartment containing the historical materials had been his way of preserving the evidence until he could secure proper mineral rights to the area where he believed the mine entrance was located. But his sudden death had left the discovery incomplete. Now it was up to Sophia to decide what to do with this unexpected inheritance. Not just physical artifacts, but a mystery spanning nearly 150 years. As she finally went to bed in the early hours of the morning, Sophia's mind whirled with possibilities and concerns. The gold samples alone could solve their immediate financial problems. The historical documents might be valuable to museums or collectors. But if the coordinates really could lead to the rediscovery of a rich gold vein, the implications were far more significant. Modern mining operations could extract gold far more efficiently than 19th century methods, potentially making even a moderate-sized vein extremely valuable. But there were serious complications to consider. Who owned the mineral rights to the land where the mine was located? What environmental impact would reopening the mine have? And if word got out about their discovery, would treasure hunters and speculators descend on the area, disrupting their quiet new beginning? Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of underground passages and the echo of pickaxes against stone. Morning brought practical reality back into focus. It was Monday, a school day for Lily and a work day for Sophia, who had secured a part-time position at the local agricultural extension office 3 days a week. They went through their regular routine: breakfast, medications for Lily, final checks of backpack and lunch. But the excitement of their discovery hummed beneath the surface of every interaction. "Remember, we are keeping this our secret for now," Sophia reminded Lily as she dropped her at school. "No talking about treasure or gold mines, okay?" "I know, Mom," Lily replied with surprising seriousness. "Great-grandpa kept it secret for a reason." After work, Sophia drove to the county records office in Riverview, where she spent 2 hours researching property boundaries and mineral rights in the area where she suspected the mine might be located. What she discovered was both encouraging and complicated. The land that likely contained the Reynolds claim was now part of the Pike National Forest, federal land where new mining claims were heavily restricted, but not impossible to establish. Historical claims that predated the creation of the national forest sometimes retained their validity if they could be proven with original documentation. The process for verifying such claims was complex and typically required legal assistance. But it was not hopeless. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Sophia spread the original survey maps across the kitchen table and compared them with modern topographical maps of the region. Using her father's research and her own environmental science training, she began the process of translating the 1870s measurements to current landmarks. The challenge was significant. The landscape had been dramatically altered not just by the original landslide, but by nearly 150 years of erosion, forest growth, and occasional wildfires. Modern roads and trails did not exist when the original surveys were made, and some of the reference points used by the miners, like the lightning-struck pine with 3 trunks or the boulder shaped like a wolf's head, were impossible to identify with certainty. But her father had made substantial progress in this translation work. His final notes indicated 3 potential locations where the mine entrance might be found, with Site B considered most promising based on soil and rock samples he had collected from the area. Sophia found herself developing a newfound respect for her father's methodical approach. This had not been the wild goose chase she had always assumed. He had applied genuine scientific principles to his search, combining historical research, geological knowledge, and careful field observation. The notes reflected a mind that was analytical and thorough, qualities she had inherited from him but had never acknowledged. After several hours of work, Sophia felt confident she could locate her father's Site B using his detailed directions and GPS coordinates. The location was approximately 4 miles from their property, in a relatively remote section of the national forest accessible via hiking trails and old logging roads. According to his notes, the area showed geological characteristics consistent with gold-bearing formations, and he had collected surface samples containing trace amounts of gold. The question now was what to do with this information. Attempting to locate and reopen a 19th-century mine without proper permissions would be both illegal and potentially dangerous. Formally filing to reclaim the historical mining rights would require legal expertise she could not afford and would create public records that might attract unwanted attention. Sophia considered her options carefully. The responsible approach would be to contact the proper authorities, perhaps the U.S. Forest Service and the Colorado Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety, to discuss the historical documentation and explore legal avenues for investigation. But that would mean surrendering control of the discovery and potentially receiving little or no benefit from it, especially if the mine proved valuable. Another option would be to seek private investment from someone with experience in mining, claims, and the financial resources to navigate the legal process. But that would mean sharing whatever was discovered and trusting someone else with information that had been kept secret for generations. The simplest path would be to sell the historical artifacts to museums or collectors, use the gold samples to address their immediate financial needs, and leave the actual mine undisturbed. This would provide a practical solution to their current problems without the complications of pursuing the larger discovery. As Sophia deliberated, she found herself thinking about what her father would have wanted. Despite their differences, she knew he had been driven by more than just the potential financial reward. He had been captivated by the historical mystery, the challenge of solving a puzzle that had confounded others for decades. He had wanted to complete what his ancestors had started, not just to find gold, but to vindicate the reputation of men who had been dismissed as failures or frauds. The next morning, Sophia made a decision that would set their course for the coming weeks. She would conduct preliminary research on her own, visiting Site B to determine if there was visible evidence supporting her father's theory about the mine location. Based on what she found, she would then decide whether to pursue formal legal channels, seek professional assistance, or simply preserve the historical record without attempting to rediscover the mine itself. But first, she needed more information about modern mining regulations and the process for establishing historical claims. This led her to the Pine Creek Public Library, a small but well-maintained building that served as both library and community center for the town. The librarian, Ellen Harker, was a woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of weathered features that came from a lifetime in the mountains. When Sophia mentioned she was researching historical mining claims for a personal project, Ellen's interest was immediately piqued. "My family has been in Pine Creek since the mining days," Ellen explained, leading Sophia to a local history section that occupied a special corner of the library. "My great-great-grandfather was a miner himself. Family legend says he was involved in one of the richest strikes in the county, though it did not end well." Sophia felt a chill of recognition. Was his name James Harker, by any chance? Ellen's eyes widened. "Why, yes. How did you know that?" In that moment, Sophia faced a crucial decision. How much to reveal to this woman who might be a direct descendant of her ancestor's mining partner? After a brief hesitation, she chose cautious honesty. "My great-great-grandfather was James Blackwood. I believe he and your ancestor may have worked together." Ellen Harker sat down slowly, her expression a mixture of shock and intrigue. "Blackwood, of course. The third partner in the Reynolds operation. My grandmother used to mention that name." Though the full story was never clear, she studied Sophia's face. "You are Jackson's daughter, are you not? I should have made the connection when you moved into his place." "Yes. I recently found some of his research materials about the old mining operations." Ellen nodded thoughtfully. "Your father came to see me many times over the years, looking through our historical archives. He was convinced the Reynolds claim was not just a legend." She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "Did he find anything significant before he passed?" Sophia hesitated again, uncertain how much to trust this unexpected connection to her family's past. "He left some interesting materials. I am still going through them." "I see." Ellen's gaze was shrewd but not unfriendly. "Well, if you are serious about researching historical claims, there is someone you should meet. My nephew, Michael Harker, works for the Colorado Geological Survey. He specializes in historical mining operations and could give you accurate information about the legal process without unnecessary complications." The offer seemed both fortuitous and slightly concerning. Was it mere coincidence that a descendant of James Harker worked in a position directly relevant to Sophia's discovery, or had the Harker family maintained their own interest in the lost mine over the generations? "That would be very helpful," Sophia said, deciding that controlled engagement was better than obvious avoidance. "Does he live nearby?" "He is based in Denver, but he visits regularly. In fact, he will be here this weekend for our family's annual reunion. I could introduce you if you would like." Sophia agreed to the introduction, reasoning that understanding the official processes would be valuable regardless of what path she ultimately chose. Ellen provided several books on Colorado mining history and regulations, which Sophia checked out along with children's books for Lily, to maintain the appearance of a casual visit. As Sophia left the library, her mind raced with new questions and possibilities. The Harker connection was unexpected but potentially valuable. If Ellen's family had preserved their own records about the Reynolds claim, combining that information with the Blackwood materials might provide a more complete picture. But it also meant that others might have been pursuing the same discovery her father had sought, and might have their own claims to whatever was found. The next few days passed in a blur of normal activities overlaid with secret research. Sophia worked her shifts at the Agricultural Extension Office, helped Lily with school projects, and continued the barn apartment renovations alongside Dan Phillips. But every spare moment was devoted to studying her father's materials and the books from the library, developing a deeper understanding of both the historical context and the modern legal frameworks. Rounding abandoned mines on Thursday afternoon, with Lily at a friend's house for a playdate, a development that delighted Sophia. Seeing her daughter forming normal social connections despite their unusual circumstances, Sophia decided to make her first exploratory visit to Site B. The location was accessible via a combination of Forest Service roads and hiking trails. Sophia packed essential gear, water, first aid supplies, basic tools, her father's detailed notes, and a handheld GPS device she had borrowed from the Agricultural Extension Office. She left a note for Dan explaining she was surveying the property boundaries and would return by evening, then set out in her SUV. The drive took her deeper into the mountains, past scenic overlooks and campgrounds until she reached a small parking area, marking the trailhead for Whisper Ridge, a moderately difficult hiking path that would take her within a half-mile of her father's site B. The October air was crisp and thin at this elevation, nearly 9,000 feet above sea level. Aspen trees displayed brilliant yellow foliage against the dark green of pines, and the silence was broken only by the occasional call of birds and the whisper of wind through branches. As Sophia hiked, she understood more viscerally why this landscape had captivated generations of her family. There was something elemental about these mountains, a sense of ancient secrets waiting beneath the surface. Following her father's detailed directions, she left the main trail after about 2 miles, taking a game path that led through denser forest toward a rocky ridge. The terrain became increasingly challenging, steep in places, with loose scree and fallen trees creating natural obstacles. But Sophia, who had always maintained her physical fitness despite the demands of single motherhood, moved steadily toward her destination. When she finally reached the coordinates marked as Site B, she found herself in a small clearing on a south-facing slope. The area was partially ringed by weathered granite outcroppings, with a steep drop-off to the north where it appeared a section of the hillside had collapsed long ago. Looking at the topography with educated eyes, Sophia could see how this might indeed be the site of a historic landslide, one significant enough to bury a mine entrance completely. She began a methodical survey of the area, referring frequently to both her father's notes and the original maps. The landscape had clearly changed dramatically since the 1870s, but certain features remained recognizable, particularly a distinctive formation her father had called the Sentinel, a tall spire of rock that matched a sketch in the original miner's journal. Using this as a fixed reference point, Sophia attempted to follow the bearings indicated in Harker's journal, accounting for the changes in landscape. This led her to a section of the slope where the ground leveled off slightly before dropping away, possibly the remnant of an artificial terrace created during mining operations. The area was now covered with mature pines and underbrush, but as Sophia carefully examined the ground, she noticed subtle signs that this was not entirely natural terrain. There were faint linear patterns beneath the forest floor, places where the contour did not quite match the surrounding hillside. To an untrained eye, it would appear completely natural, but Sophia's environmental science background helped her recognize the ghost of human activity beneath decades of natural reclamation. Her heart racing with excitement, she began a more detailed examination, carefully moving leaf litter and using a small trowel to investigate promising areas. After about an hour of meticulous work, she uncovered something that sent a shock of validation through her entire body. A rusted metal object partially embedded in the compacted soil. Carefully excavating around it, she revealed what appeared to be a mining rail spike, the kind used to secure narrow-gauge track in 19th century mining operations. It was the crucial question, whether to bring Michael Harker fully into her confidence. Sophia studied him carefully, trying to gauge his character and intentions. As a scientist himself, he would understand the value of the discovery beyond simple treasure hunting. As a descendant of James Harker, he had a legitimate connection to the historical find. And as a professional geologist with connections to regulatory agencies, he could provide expertise she desperately needed. I would, she decided, but I need to understand your intentions first. What would you hope to do if we confirmed this is indeed the Reynolds claim? Michael considered the question thoughtfully. Professionally, I would want to document the discovery properly, its historical significance, geological context, and environmental implications. Personally, he glanced at his aunt, I would want to vindicate the reputation of our ancestors, who were dismissed as failures or frauds when they were actually successful prospectors, who chose discretion over fame. And the gold, Sophia pressed. If there is still a viable deposit, that is more complicated, Michael admitted. Extracting gold from a historical mine on federal land would require navigating substantial regulatory hurdles. It would likely necessitate partnership with a mining company, with the resources to manage the legal process and physical operations. But if successful, it could certainly provide financial benefits to the descendants of the original partners, including both our families. Ellen reached across the table to touch Sophia's hand. What Michael is not saying directly is that neither of us is interested in cheating you out of what rightfully belongs to your family as well as ours. If there is value to be found, it should be shared according to the original partnership agreement. The sincerity in the older woman's eyes convinced Sophia more than any legal assurances could have. I appreciate that, and I agree whatever we discover belongs to both families historically, whatever the modern legal implications might be. Michael seemed relieved by this understanding. Then I suggest we combine our resources, your father's research and my professional expertise, to determine exactly what we are dealing with. Once we have a clearer picture, we can discuss next steps. They arranged to meet the following morning for an expedition to the site Sophia had discovered. Michael would bring specialized equipment for a more thorough assessment, while Sophia would share her father's detailed notes and coordinates. As they parted outside the cafe, Michael hesitated, then spoke with careful deliberation. There is one more thing you should know. You and I are not the only ones interested in the Reynolds claim. There's a mining corporation, Westridge Resources, that has been quietly researching historical claims throughout this region. They have already approached several families with local mining history, including distant branches of the Harker family, seeking information about lost mines. How do you know this? Sophia asked. They approached me 6 months ago in my professional capacity, asking me to evaluate some historical mining documents they had acquired. Documents that mentioned the Reynolds operation, though without the specific details we possess. Michael's expression grew serious. They are well-funded and persistent. If word gets out about tangible evidence of the Reynolds claim, they will move quickly to secure whatever rights they can. This new information added urgency to their investigation. If a corporate entity was already pursuing the Reynolds claim, the window for Sophia and the Harkers to establish their historical connection might be narrowing. That evening, as Sophia prepared dinner in their increasingly comfortable barn apartment, she shared a simplified version of developments with Lily. So Mr. Harker is like our cousin from a long time ago? Lily asked, setting the table with careful precision. Not exactly a cousin, but his family and ours were connected through the mine. His great-great-grandfather and our great-great-grandfather were partners, and he wants to help us find the gold mine too. Sophia smiled at her daughter's consistent focus on the treasure aspect. He wants to help us understand the historical significance of great-grandpa's discovery. The mine itself might not be accessible anymore. It has been almost 150 years since the landslide. But if we do find it, we will be rich, right? Lily persisted. Sophia sat down beside her daughter, recognizing an opportunity for an important conversation. Sweetie, I want you to understand something. What we have found is already valuable in many ways. It is a connection to our family history. It is an important historical discovery. And yes, the gold samples themselves are worth something. But true wealth is not just about money, I know, Lily said with the slight impatience of a child who had heard such platitudes before. It is about family and love and stuff. Yes, but it is also about having purpose and doing what is right. Sophia chose her words carefully. Great-grandpa spent his life searching for this mine, not just because of the gold, but because he believed in finishing what his ancestors started. He wanted to uncover the truth when others had dismissed it as fantasy. Lily considered this, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. So it is about believing in something even when other people think you are wrong? Exactly, and about persistence, continuing to work toward a goal even when it is difficult. Sophia smoothed Lily's hair gently. That is something I admire about you too, you know. The way you never give up, even when your asthma makes things harder. Lily beamed at the unexpected praise. And now we are finishing what great-grandpa started, right? Like a family mission. A family mission. Sophia echoed, liking the phrase. Yes, I suppose we are. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with the first hint of winter in the air. Sophia prepared carefully for the expedition, packing more extensive supplies than on her previous visit, additional tools, cameras, sample bags, and enough food and water for a full day in the field. She had arranged for Lily to spend the day with her new friend Emma's family, not yet ready to involve her daughter in the potentially hazardous exploration of an abandoned mine site. Michael arrived promptly at 7, his vehicle loaded with professional equipment, ground-penetrating radar, specialized sampling tools, and safety gear. "The GPR will help us see beneath the surface without disturbing the site," he explained. "If there is a mine shaft or tunnel under the landslide debris, we should be able to detect it." They drove in companionable silence for the first few miles, each lost in their own thoughts about what the day might reveal. Eventually, Michael spoke. "I have been reviewing the combined information from our family collections. If we overlay your father's modern geological analysis with the original survey coordinates, the location you found is almost certainly the primary entrance to the Reynolds operation." "Almost certainly?" Sophia asked. "In geology, we rarely deal in absolutes." Michael replied with a small smile. "But the evidence is compelling. The question is what remains after 145 years of erosion, forest growth, and potential collapse of underground workings." They parked at the same trailhead Sophia had used previously and began the hike to Site B. The additional equipment made for a more strenuous journey, but Michael proved to be both physically capable and considerate, adjusting his pace to match Sophia's and sharing the heavier loads. As they hiked, their conversation revealed more common ground than Sophia had expected. Both had pursued scientific education, despite financial challenges. Both felt deep connections to the Colorado mountains beyond mere aesthetic appreciation, and both had experienced significant personal losses. Michael's wife had died of cancer 5 years earlier, leaving him to raise their son alone until he left for college. "That is partly why I understand your caution," Michael explained as they navigated a particularly steep section of trail. "When you are solely responsible for a child's well-being, every decision carries extra weight. You cannot afford to chase fantasies or take uncalculated risks." "Exactly," Sophia agreed, surprised by his insight. "Yet here I am, pursuing a legendary, lost gold mine." Michael laughed. "But you are doing it methodically, based on evidence and research. That is not chasing fantasies. It is following where solid information leads, even when the destination seems extraordinary." When they reached the clearing Sophia had identified previously, Michael became all business, setting up his equipment with practiced efficiency while Sophia marked the locations where she had found mining artifacts. The ground-penetrating radar survey took nearly 2 hours of careful work, with Michael creating a grid pattern across the area where the mine entrance was most likely located. As the data began to accumulate on his tablet screen, his expression grew increasingly animated. "This is remarkable," he said finally, showing Sophia the composite image. "There is definitely a void beneath this section of the slope, approximately 12 feet below the surface, extending horizontally into the hillside. The dimensions are consistent with a mining tunnel from that era." Sophia felt a surge of excitement. "So the mine is still there, just buried. At least part of it appears to be intact." Michael confirmed. The entrance was clearly obliterated by the landslide, but the main tunnel seems to have survived. In fact, he manipulated the image, enhancing certain features. There appears to be a junction about 30 feet in, with branches leading in different directions. That is consistent with a developed mining operation, not just an exploratory shaft. The implications were significant. If substantial portions of the mine remained intact beneath the surface, the gold vein might still be accessible with modern excavation techniques. Even more importantly for immediate purposes, the GPR data provided compelling evidence that this was indeed the legendary Reynolds claim, confirming both the historical records and Sophia's father's research. "What next?" Sophia asked, trying to contain her excitement. "We should take soil and rock samples from the area directly above the tunnel to analyze for mineral content," Michael replied, already reaching for his sampling kit. "That will help determine if the gold deposits mentioned in the historical records are likely still present. We should also document everything thoroughly, photographs, precise GPS coordinates, detailed notes. If we decide to pursue this officially, we will need comprehensive documentation. For the next several hours, they worked as an efficient team, collecting samples, mapping the site precisely, and creating the kind of scientific documentation that would stand up to official scrutiny. Michael's expertise complemented Sophia's environmental science background, allowing them to assess both the potential value of the discovery and its possible environmental implications. By mid-afternoon, they had assembled compelling evidence that they had indeed located the Reynolds claim, and that it potentially contained significant gold deposits, still accessible with modern mining techniques. The question now was how to proceed with this knowledge. As they packed up their equipment for the return hike, Michael broached the crucial topic. We have several options, each with different implications. We could file a claim based on historical rights, which would create a public record but establish legal standing. We could approach Westridge Resources from a position of strength, with documented evidence of the mine's location and our ancestral connection. Or we could seek partnership with a different mining entity that might offer better terms. Sophia considered these options as they began the trek back to the trailhead. What about environmental concerns? This area is part of the National Forest. Would modern mining operations even be permitted? It is complicated, Michael admitted. There are exemptions for historical claims that predated the forest designation, but they require extensive environmental impact studies and mitigation plans. Modern mining is far less destructive than historical methods, but it still has significant impacts. This raised a profound question for Sophia, one that touched on her professional values as an environmental scientist. Could she in good conscience pursue a mining operation in a national forest, even if it meant financial security for her and Lily? Was there a way to balance the legitimate historical claim with responsible environmental stewardship? As they discussed these complex issues, the sound of voices ahead on the trail caught their attention. Rounding a bend, they encountered a group of 3 people with professional-looking equipment similar to their own, taking soil samples and photographs of the surrounding area. Michael tensed visibly. Westridge Resources, he whispered to Sophia. The woman in the red jacket is Victoria Crane, their chief geologist. I have met her at industry conferences. Before Sophia could respond, Victoria looked up and noticed them. Recognition flashed across her face as she spotted Michael. Dr. Harker, what a surprise to find you out here. Her tone was friendly, but her eyes were sharply assessing, taking in their equipment and Sophia's presence with obvious interest. Michael maintained his professional composure. Ms. Crane, conducting field research for the Geological Survey. Victoria's smile did not reach her eyes. What a coincidence. We are doing preliminary environmental assessments for potential recreational development. The explanation was plausible, but unlikely given the remote location and the specific nature of their sampling equipment. Introductions were made with surface cordiality, though Sophia noticed how carefully Victoria observed her reaction to the Westridge name. The encounter was brief but charged with unspoken competition, ending with Victoria casually mentioning that Westridge had exciting projects developing in the area and would love to consult with local experts like Dr. Harker. As they continued down the trail, safely out of earshot, Michael's expression was grim. They are getting close. Those were not random samples they were taking. They are systematically surveying this area, probably based on historical research similar to what our families preserved. How much time do we have? Sophia asked. Hard to say. They do not have our precise information, but they have resources and professionals working full-time on this. We should assume weeks rather than months. Before they narrowed down the potential locations significantly, this accelerated their timeline dramatically. What had seemed like a discovery they could carefully consider now demanded more urgent decisions. By the time they reached their vehicles, both agreed they needed to move quickly to protect their interests and the historical significance of their find. Let me make some calls, Michael said as they loaded their equipment. I have contacts at the Colorado Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety, who can advise us on the proper procedures for documenting a historical claim. And I know an attorney who specializes in mining law. She could help us understand our options without creating public records prematurely. They agreed to reconvene the following evening at Sophia's place, where they could review their findings with Ellen and discuss next steps. As Sophia drove to pick up Lily from her playdate, her mind whirled with possibilities, concerns, and an unexpected sense of partnership with the Harkers that had transformed her isolated struggle into a shared mission. Emma's mother, Karen, greeted Sophia warmly when she arrived at their comfortable farmhouse on the outskirts of Pine Creek. The girls have had a wonderful day. They built a fort in the barn, collected chicken eggs, and Emma has been teaching Lily to ride our gentlest pony. A pony? Sophia had not expected equestrian activities and felt a flash of concern about Lily's asthma. With the barn dust and animal dander, Karen smiled reassuringly. Lily mentioned her asthma right away. We made sure she used her inhaler before they went near the barn, and she has had no problems at all. The mountain air seems to agree with her. As if to confirm this assessment, Lily came running from the barn, cheeks flushed with healthy excitement rather than respiratory distress. Mom, I rode a pony named Butterscotch, and I collected 6 eggs all by myself. And Emma's dad is teaching us how to make a real leather bracelet. The transformation in her daughter over these past weeks struck Sophia profoundly. In their previous life, Lily had been regularly sidelined by her condition, watching other children's activities from the periphery. Here, she was thriving, still, managing her asthma, but not defined or limited by it. The mountain environment, which Sophia had initially worried might exacerbate Lily's respiratory issues, seemed instead to be strengthening her. Our company was founded specifically to develop resources responsibly, Martinez explained. We use technologies that reduce environmental footprint compared to traditional methods, and we have experience working within national forest boundaries under strict regulatory oversight. The financial projections she presented were sobering in their magnitude. Based on the preliminary data, the combined gold and rare earth elements could represent a deposit worth hundreds of millions of dollars over the life of the operation. Even a minority stake and royalty structure would potentially generate more wealth than either family had imagined. This would be a long-term development, Martinez cautioned. From legal approval through environmental assessment to actual production could take 3 to 5 years. We would provide advance payments against future royalties during the development phase, but the major financial returns would come only after production begins. This timeline was actually reassuring to Sophia. It suggested a methodical, responsible approach rather than a rush to extract maximum value quickly regardless of consequences. It also allowed time for proper historical documentation and community engagement. After Martinez departed with samples for more detailed analysis and copies of their documentation for her company's legal team to review, Sophia, Michael, and Ellen gathered to discuss their impressions. I found her credible and her approach responsible, Michael said. Their environmental commitments align with current best practices, and their financial proposal seems fair given the development costs they would assume. Ellen nodded agreement. They also expressed genuine interest in the historical aspects. Martinez mentioned potential support for a local museum exhibit about the Reynolds claim and its rediscovery. Sophia had been impressed as well, but maintained her cautious approach. I would like to research their track record on previous projects, talk to communities where they have operated, review their compliance history with regulatory agencies. Before we commit to anything, we need verification that their practices match their promises. This measured response earned approving nods from both Harkers. Over the next week, they conducted precisely this kind of due diligence, researching ethical resource development's history, consulting with environmental advocates about their reputation, and even visiting a site in Utah where the company had recently completed a mining project. What they found was consistently positive. The company was not perfect, but it had a solid record of regulatory compliance, community engagement, and environmental restoration after project completion. Most tellingly, when they spoke with county officials and local residents near previous operations, the feedback was predominantly favorable, unusual for any mining company. Meanwhile, their legal position continued to strengthen. The Colorado Mining History Museum formally authenticated the historical documents from both families, providing expert testimony about their significance and provenance. Meredith Cohen filed the comprehensive claim documentation with the appropriate federal agencies, establishing their standing as descendants of the original miners, with legitimate historical evidence of the claim's existence and location. Throughout this increasingly complex process, Sophia maintained her focus on creating stability for Lily. The barn apartment renovations continued, transforming the space into a comfortable home that reflected both the building's history and their personal needs. Lily's school project on local mining history became a source of pride for her, connecting her to both the community and her family legacy in a way that strengthened her sense of belonging. The weekend before they were scheduled to make their final decision about partnership with Ethical Resource Development, Sophia received an unexpected visit from Victoria Crane of Westridge Resources. The corporate geologist arrived unannounced at the barn, her expensive SUV looking out of place on the rural property. Ms. Blackwood, Crane began without preamble after Sophia met her at the door. I will be direct. We are aware of your historical claim filing and your discussions with Ethical Resource Development. Westridge is prepared to offer significantly better terms for the rights to develop the Reynolds claim. Sophia kept her expression neutral despite her surprise at this direct approach. I appreciate your interest, Ms. Crane, but we are in exclusive discussions with another company at the moment. Crane smiled thinly. Nothing is exclusive until contracts are signed. Our offer would include immediate cash payment of $1 million to each family, plus superior royalty terms once production begins. The figure was deliberately shocking, designed to overwhelm Sophia's practical considerations with sheer financial magnitude. $1 million would solve every financial concern she had ever had, provide for Lily's education through graduate school if she wished, and create genuine long-term security. That is certainly a generous offer, Sophia acknowledged, maintaining her composure. May I ask what your company knows about the site that justifies such terms? Crane's expression flickered briefly. Sophia had identified the key question. We have conducted our own geological surveys of the area and have reason to believe the deposit contains significant rare earth elements in addition to gold. Given current market conditions and projected technology demands, such a deposit has strategic value beyond its immediate market price. So Westridge had indeed identified the rare earth potential, either through their own sampling or through information leaked from somewhere in the process. This explained both their aggressive approach and the extraordinary financial offer. I will need to discuss this with the Harkers, Sophia replied, neither accepting nor rejecting the proposal. We are making decisions as equal partners in this matter, of course. Crane handed her a business card with a handwritten number on the back. That is my personal cell. Call anytime through Sunday evening. After that, our offer will necessarily adjust based on other opportunities we are pursuing. The implied deadline was another pressure tactic, but Sophia simply thanked her for the information and watched as the sleek vehicle departed down the gravel drive. She called Michael immediately, describing the unexpected offer and Crane's approach. His response was measured but concerned. $1 million up front is significantly more aggressive than industry standard for unproven deposits, he noted. They must have very strong indications about the rare earth potential. It is worth discussing, though I have serious reservations about Westridge's environmental record compared to Ethical Resource. They arranged an emergency meeting that evening at Alan's home in Pine Creek, where they could discuss the competing offers and make their final decision. Lily would join them for dinner before being set up with a movie in another room during the more sensitive discussions. Alan's home proved to be a Victorian cottage meticulously maintained to reflect its 1890s origins, while incorporating modern comforts, much like what Sophia was attempting with the barn apartment. The similarities in their approach to preserving historical structures while adapting them for contemporary life struck Sophia as emblematic of their broader partnership, honoring the past while pragmatically addressing present needs. Over a home-cooked meal that reflected Ellen's lifetime in the mountain community, venison stew, fresh baked bread, and vegetables from her garden. They began their discussion in terms appropriate for Lily's presence. "We are deciding how best to share great-grandpa's discovery with the world," Ellen explained to the child. "Whether through a museum exhibit, a book about the history, or maybe even reopening the mine to show people how gold was discovered in the old days." Lily considered this seriously, showing the thoughtfulness that often surprised adults who underestimated her. "I think Great-Grandpa would want people to know the real story, not just about finding gold, but about why he and his friends kept it secret for so long." Her innocent observation captured something essential that the adults had been circling around. In their more complex discussions, the importance of controlling the narrative, of ensuring the historical record reflected the nuanced reality rather than simply the treasure-hunting aspect that would naturally capture public imagination. After Lily was settled with her movie in Ellen's cozy guest room, the adults turned to the serious business of comparing the two offers and their implications. Michael laid out the factors systematically. Westridge offers substantially more immediate compensation, but has a problematic environmental record and a reputation for aggressive cost-cutting once operations begin. Ethical Resource offers more modest upfront payments, but better long-term royalty structures, stronger environmental commitments, and explicit support for historical preservation aspects. Ellen added the community perspective. Westridge has a history of tension with communities where they operate, bringing in outside workers rather than hiring locally, minimal investment in local infrastructure, and resistance to addressing concerns once operations are underway. Ethical Resource actively recruits and trains local workforce, and has established community advisory boards with actual influence on operational decisions. Sophia considered these points, then added her own primary concern. Beyond the financial and environmental considerations, there is the question of legacy. What story do we want this discovery to tell? Is it primarily about extracting maximum value, or about honoring the historical significance while responsibly developing the resource? The question resonated with all of them, highlighting the broader implications of their choice. This was not just a business decision, but a moral one that would shape how the Reynolds claim was perceived historically, and how their community would be affected for generations. "I believe we already know our answer," Ellen said gently. "The fact that we are even having this conversation suggests where our values lie. If maximum financial gain were our only consideration, Westridge's offer would end the discussion immediately." Michael nodded agreement. "My scientific reputation and professional ethics are tied to this decision as well. I could not in good conscience partner with a company whose environmental practices I have previously criticized in professional publications." Sophia felt the weight of the decision, acknowledging that while the immediate financial benefit of Westridge's offer was tempting, it did not align with the values she wanted to model for Lily, or the legacy she wanted to create from her father's discovery. "Then we proceed with Ethical Resource," she concluded. "But we use Westridge's offer as leverage to improve certain terms, particularly around community investment, historical documentation, and environmental monitoring." This strategic approach earned approving nods from both Harkers. They spent the next hour outlining their negotiation priorities for the final agreement. With Ethical Resource development, creating a unified position that balanced practical financial concerns with broader values around environmental stewardship and historical preservation. When they finally concluded their discussion, a sense of clarity and purpose had replaced the uncertainty triggered by Westridge's aggressive offer. They had chosen a path that honored their ancestors' legacy, protected the environment, benefited their community, and still provided significant financial security for both families. As Sophia gathered a sleepy Lily for the drive home, Ellen pulled her aside for a private word. "Your father would be proud of the decision you made tonight," the older woman said softly. "Not just because you are validating his lifelong work, but because you are approaching it with wisdom and integrity he would have respected deeply." The simple statement touched Sophia more profoundly than she expected, healing something in her relationship with her father's memory that she had not realized was still wounded. "Thank you for saying that. It means a lot coming from someone who knew him well." The next morning, Sophia called Victoria Crane and politely declined Westridge's offer. citing their commitment to ethical resources approach despite the financial differential. Crane's response was predictably corporate, expressing disappointment while maintaining professional courtesy, but her final comment revealed more genuine emotion. "You are making a mistake, Ms. Blackwood. In this industry, sentiment is expensive and loyalty rarely rewarded. But I respect your decision and wish you luck with your chosen partner." The following week brought the formal signing of their partnership agreement with Ethical Resource Development. The terms reflected their negotiated priorities: responsible environmental practices, community investment, support for historical documentation, fair financial compensation, and ongoing involvement of both families in key decisions about the project. The initial payments, while less than Westridge's dramatic offer, were still substantial, enough for Sophia to complete the barn renovation without financial strain, establish a college fund for Lily, and create a small foundation to support environmental education in Pine Creek. The long-term royalty structure would provide sustainable income for generations, ensuring that both families would benefit from the discovery their ancestors had made nearly 150 years earlier. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, Sophia stood with Lily, the Harkers, Catherine Martinez, and a small group of community leaders at the site they now confidently identified as the Reynolds claim. The environmental assessment was underway, the legal process moving forward as anticipated, and the historical documentation nearly complete for publication and museum exhibition. A ceremonial marker was being placed to commemorate the site's historical significance, not just the mine itself, but the story of how it had been lost, preserved in family memory, and rediscovered through generations of careful stewardship and research. As Lily helped Ellen unveil the bronze plaque, Sophia felt the convergence of past and future, of her father's persistence and her own pragmatism, of historical legacy and contemporary opportunity. The plaque's inscription captured this beautifully. The Reynolds claim discovered 1873, lost 1877, rediscovered 2023 through the preservation of family knowledge, the dedication of generations of researchers, and the collaboration of descendants, committed to responsible stewardship of both history and resources. The gathered community applauded as the sunlight caught the polished bronze, but for Sophia, the most meaningful moment came when Lily looked up at her, with eyes bright with understanding beyond her years. "We did it, Mom," she said simply. "We finished great-grandpa's quest." "We did," Sophia agreed, her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "But we also started something new, something that will continue long after us." It was the perfect distillation of what their journey had become, not merely the completion of her father's unfinished search, or the solution to their financial struggles, but the beginning of a new chapter that honored the past while creating possibilities for the future. Conclusion: when Sophia Blackwood first stood at her father's abandoned property, with less than $3,000 to her name, she could never have imagined how completely her life would transform. What began as a desperate gamble to avoid homelessness became a journey of rediscovery, not just of a legendary lost gold mine, but of family connections, community support, and personal strength. The Reynolds claim had indeed proven to contain treasure, but the true wealth Sophia discovered went far beyond gold and rare earth minerals. She found healing for old wounds with her father's memory, understanding his passion in ways she never had before. She witnessed her daughter Lily flourish in their new mountain home, her health improving and her confidence growing as she embraced their family's remarkable legacy. Most importantly, Sophia discovered her own capacity to navigate complex challenges with integrity and wisdom. In choosing a path that balanced financial security with environmental responsibility and historical preservation, she created a legacy that would benefit not just her family, but an entire community for generations to come. The old barn that had once seemed like a last resort had become a true home, just as her father's obsession that she had once dismissed had become a meaningful mission. They completed together across the boundaries of life and death. In renovating her father's barn, Sophia had renovated not just a building, but her understanding of family, of purpose, and of what constitutes true wealth in a life well lived. As she watched Lily proudly explaining the history of the Reynolds claim, Two visitors at the new museum exhibit, Sophia recognized the perfect symmetry of their journey. They had begun with nothing but a key to an old barn and a hidden journal. Now they held the keys to a future filled with possibility. All because she had found the courage to open a door her father had left for her, leading to discoveries more valuable than gold. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.